Hey everybody, it's Rick Elkin. Are we having fun yet? I haven't made a video in a while, and I thought this might be the perfect opportunity now that I'm kind of grounded and we're all practicing social distancing, that maybe I could do something to help people who, like me, are going to be stuck around the house. No partying, no social events, no travel, no nothing really. So we're probably going to end up doing a lot of binge watching of old TV reruns and I don't know what else, old golf tournaments, basketball games, who knows. But, you know, obviously the one thing a lot of us will probably do is watch old movies. And I had this idea the other day I thought you might be interested in, that I could put a little bit different spin on. I was going to give a talk actually it was going to be this weekend, but it's been canceled because of this coronavirus thing. And I was going to talk about my new book and some of the theories I have in that book. And to do that, I was going to use an analogy. And while I was going through that, I thought, hey, here's another way that I could kind of get this out there and also package it with entertainment and with some entertainment value. So here was my idea. I want to do a weekly, what you might call binge watchers twisted movie recommendations. And what I want to do is each week I'll come up with a movie that I recommend. I'll pull out of the archives something that's probably an older classic movie. And before you watch it, I'm going to give you some interesting ideas about how you can see things in the movie you may not have seen the first time or two that you watched it. And I think it'll help enhance your enjoyment and also stimulate your thinking. So I'm going to do this on a weekly basis, so stay tuned. And I think that this will be fun and also current. And the first one I want to point to is one of my favorite, if not my favorite all-time movie. It's called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, starring Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher. And it was released in 1975. It was, interestingly enough, Michael Douglas, the actor, it was the first movie he ever produced. And the story, I won't get into it too much, but he bought the movie rights from his dad, who had acted in a play about this novel of Ken Kesey's and about a mental ward. And his dad, by the time they got around to making the movie, was too old to play the part. And Michael Douglas didn't think he was right for the part, so he bought the movie rights from his dad and produced the movie and brought Jack Nicholson in to be the star. So anyway, the reason I think this is an interesting movie, first of all, it's just a classic, but I think there's some messages between the lines. Like in the 60s and 70s, the singers put subliminal messages in their lyrics, mostly about drugs. Psychedelic drugs and marijuana and all that kind of stuff. But point is, they were making social messages buried in a popularized song. It was their way of protesting, things of that nature. In this movie, there's really a very interesting subtext, and that's what I want to get into. So let me kind of set the table for you. You probably remember the stories about a mental ward occupied by a group of male mental patients, and they're all kind of pathetic and broken men, and they're helplessly dependent on the medical system, on their drugs, and on their nursing attendant to get them through every day. And so one of the things I want you to think about when you watch the movie is think of them as being us. They're like many of us. We're typically dependent on our alcohol, our prescription meds, our online social media. We have a lot of dependencies. Video games, TV, 24/7. Most of us have something that we're really dependent on to keep us satisfied and happy. And we relentlessly keep ourselves occupied with some form of stimulus. And so this is sort of how I use the analogy that these mental patients were in this ward. And in the middle of this ward was Nurse Ratched, and that was Louise Fletcher, the actress. And she sits in there in her perfectly pressed white nurse's uniform, perfectly coiffed hair, and every day she dishes out the meds to the patients and makes sure that they swallow them and then go off into their la land. And during the day she helps the patients by giving them hope and tells them that everything's going to be okay, and she gives them assurances and that they're safe. Um, but she definitely keeps things under lockdown. She has complete control. She rewards good behavior, and by passing out cookies or cigarettes, little rewards. But if anyone violates the rules, misbehaves, she drops the hammer on them, and using really hurtful language and diatribes about their ignorance and their past behaviors and their dependencies and all these different things. And of course, she threatens them if they don't continue to behave, ultimately with electroshock therapy, which is the big hammer she holds over their heads. So she's got the place just the way she wants it. And then all of a sudden, here comes a new patient. Now I want you to think of Nurse Ratched as you're watching the movie as representing the mainstream media. She controls everything the patients know about the world. She controls what they learn, what they hear, how they communicate. Their experiences are determined through her. Suddenly a new patient comes into the room, Randall McMurphy. That's Jack Nicholson. And he's only there because he chose to go to a mental hospital instead of doing hard time after being arrested for some somewhat minor violation. He's always been sort of a loudmouth rogue and constantly getting in trouble with the police. And so this is the way they decide they're going to straighten him out, and they send him to this mental ward. And so he comes in, and he's right off the bat, he doesn't like Nurse Ratched. They clash. And he kind of loves getting under her skin. And in the meantime, he befriends all these other mental patients and gets them to play cards with him and smoke cigarettes with him. And they're starting to have fun. And they really like this guy. He's got this sort of carefree attitude that none of the other guys have. In the meantime, Nurse Ratched realizes that she's got a big problem. That if she doesn't get this guy under control, she's going to lose control of the whole ward. And she's super frustrated because the tactics that she uses with all the other guys doesn't seem to work on Randall McMurphy. So I want you to think of Randall McMurphy as Donald J. Trump. He's the disruptor. He comes in and messes up the establishment. He just will not accept the old order. And so while he's getting to know these patients, he's astonished to find out that most of them are in there willingly, that they've committed themselves, that they can leave anytime they want, even though the doors are locked, but they don't. And, it's because they've traded their liberty for security and stability. And in the meantime, he sparks an urge in these guys that they hadn't felt before. And I don't want to give away the whole movie, so I won't go too far into that, but he kind of gives them that, what have you got to lose attitude that Trump used when he was running for office. What have you got to lose by voting for a guy like me? I mean, so far, things aren't so good. Maybe a change would be better. Anyway, the bottom line is that this is a microcosm of our culture and our world. And when you look at it that way, it gives a whole new kind of twist to the movie. And, Randall kind of meets his match with Nurse Ratched, and it becomes a question of she's not going to let these patients go. She's not going to let them get a chance to see what's on the outside world, and of course this puts up a massive challenge for Jack Nicholson's character. One other thing I want to mention is the director of the movie, Milos Forman, who is a Czechoslovakian. He was quoted as saying, "When I lived in Czechoslovakia from my birth in 1932, I stayed there until 1968. The Communist Party was my Nurse Ratched. They were always telling me what I could and could not do, what I was or was not allowed to say, where I was and was not allowed to go, and even who I was and was not." And I think this is really the example of what goes on in a lot of our culture right now. Nurse Ratched uses a technique called gaslighting, and this is something I talk about in my new book, and kind of explains why we have a culture of victims. These people are being psychologically controlled by things like the mass media and our education system, and all the information that they're getting is controlling them to the degree it's intimidating them. They're operating out of a sense of fear, from political correctness and the fear of being called a racist and a bigot and all these different things. And it's intimidating and it's controlling. And it's permeating our society right now. So this is the twist I wanted to throw out there for you. The movie won 5 Academy Awards. The acting is exquisite, and you'll also get to see some longtime stars that were just getting started at the time this movie was made in 1975. Danny DeVito, Brad Dourif, and Christopher Lloyd all appear in the movie in interesting and dynamic roles, and it's a lot of fun when you look back on these guys and see where they are now as older actors and so forth. So make a big bowl of popcorn, get comfortable on your sofa, dial up One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I guarantee you'll see this film differently this time than you ever have before, and I hope you really enjoy it. I'll be back next week with another Binge Watcher's Twisted Movie recommendation. Until then, I'm out. Talk to you later.